the record in State of New Mexico versus Keith Sandy and State of New Mexico versus Dominic Perez. Let the record reflect all counsel from both sides are present as well as the defendants. State, you ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
Okay, you may call your next
The
witness.
state would call the investigating officer, Jeff Stone.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Please be seated.
Good morning, Detective Stone.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Thomas Stone.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a detective with the Albuquerque Police Department.
How long have you been with APD?
I began my career with the Albuquerque Police Department in July of 2007.
Did you come from a military background before you joined APD?
Yes, I spent 8 years in the United States Army.
Can you tell the court a little bit about your service, please?
I joined the U.S. Army right out of high school. I was in the infantry, 11 Bravo, paratrooper. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne after airborne school and completing basic training from about 1999 to 2002. While there, I completed the U.S. Army Ranger School and various other courses. I then went and served with the 173rd Airborne Brigade at the outbreak of the Iraqi War. I did a parachute did a combat parachute jump into Iraq. I went through that campaign, the invasion campaign, for a year. Was stationed in Italy after that, and then I subsequently, 2005-2006, I served in Afghanistan for a little over a year. After that campaign, I got out, decided I want to be a police officer.
Okay. Your background as far as being in the military is similar to that of the defendant Dominic Perez, is that right?
Yes.
And you know he is a defendant in this case, and can you identify him as the man who's sitting next to Officer Sandy there?
Yes, that is Officer Dominic Perez. He's wearing the only one at the table wearing a red tie and a striped shirt, black coat.
Okay. And before I forget, because Kevin has reminded me we have to do jurisdictional things when we're prosecutors, this event occurred in the city of Albuquerque in the state of New Mexico, is that right?
Yes, it did.
That's why APD had jurisdictional limits?
Correct.
Okay. And the year that you came on the force, 2007, that's about the same time that the defendant Keith Sandy came on the force as well?
Yes.
And can you identify the defendant Keith Sandy? I think he's sitting next to Mr. Bregman there, is that right?
Yes, he's sitting in between Officer Dominic Perez and Attorney Sam Bregman.
Okay. Did you know either Keith Sandy or Dominic Perez before this investigation?
Yes, I had previously worked with them before.
Okay. How had you worked with them?
Officer Perez and I were worked graveyard together. We weren't in the same squad, but we worked in the same area command. That was very early on, from 2008 to 2009. That's the only time I ever worked with him, when he went to SWAT, and then I went the investigative route throughout my career. Detective Sandy, I was never assigned to an actual unit with him, but throughout the course of my investigative career, the unit he was in sometimes would assist us or assist my investigation with whatever I needed.
Okay, and that's how you came in contact with him?
Yes.
All right. You did not know James Boyd before this shooting, did you?
No, I did not.
But you have come to learn what he looked like since the investigation, is that right, sir?
Yes.
Okay, let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 15, and can you identify that picture, please, sir?
It's a photograph of James Boyd.
Your Honor, I move State's 15.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor. 15 will be admitted.
Where were you when this encounter with Mr. Boyd started?
I was actually at the Outpost ice rink, ice skating. I was trying to teach myself how to skate because now I play hockey.
All right. And you've learned how to skate since then, is that
yes.
right? All right. How did you first find out or how were you first dispatched to the scene of the shooting?
I was called by dispatch and advised that there had been an officer-involved shooting in the area of 812 Pedro Vista, but up in the open space area.
At the time you arrived, where was Mr. Boyd?
He had already been transported to the hospital.
And at the time that you arrived and began your investigation, had he died yet?
No.
How long was it before you learned that Mr. Boyd had been killed?
It was quite a few hours. It was after I had already been into my investigation for quite a while.
Okay. Can you talk to the court about the initial briefing or how you started the investigation there at the scene?
Sure. I started the investigation similarly how I start all my investigations. I have a what's called a primary briefing, where all of my assisting detectives and criminalistics detectives, the scientific portion of the investigation, as well as members of the command staff, once everyone's present and all the representatives there from OMI, the district attorney's office, we get everybody together. In this particular incident, there were so many of us. We did it inside the garage of Alexander Thixton's house. He was not present for any of the briefings, but he allowed us to use his garage. And that's what started off the investigation, as I was briefed up on some officers that were there on scene, just so I could get a lay of the land, figure out kind of, a summary of what happened.
Was Chief Eden there at that initial briefing?
Yes.
Were there members, representatives of the district attorney's office there at that initial briefing?
Yes.
And someone from OMI as well?
Correct.
Who did the presentation for the briefing of what had happened in the shooting?
I was briefed up on by two officers, Sergeant Carpenter, who was on scene early on in the incident. His call sign was Sam 55. And then after he briefed me up on everything that happened while he was there, I was also briefed up by K-9 Officer Scott Weimer-Skirch.
Okay, now I know this is your usual practice to have a briefing sort of so you know how to go out and investigate, but in a shooting involving a citizen, it would be unusual to have people who were actually involved in the shooting or the incident brief you on what happened.
Objection leading.
Rephrase the question, please.
Yes. Is that a different way, was this handled in a different way than you'd handle an investigation into a citizen shooting?
A police officer is always the one that briefs me up on the incident that occurred. As it relates to a citizen, whether we're talking about a homicide or a murder, it's usually the primary investigating officer that will brief me up, not a citizen. A citizen is usually interviewed as a witness.
Yes, sir. And when you have a briefing on a citizen shooting, has it ever happened that a witness or somebody who was involved in it has briefed you on the shooting?
No.
And what is your understanding of Scott Weimer-Skirch's role or how close he was to the actual shooting itself?
He was intimately involved into it. It's not something I knew early on when I had him brief me, but obviously after he briefed me up, I realized, okay, he was actually there and witnessed it.
All right. And what other officers that had been involved in the shooting were there when this initial briefing took place from Sergeant Carpenter and Officer Weimer-Skirch?
No other officers.
All right. Where were Officers Sandy and Perez during this briefing?
They were on scene, I believe, in their vehicles or in somebody's vehicle.
Did anyone take the statements of either officer before they left the scene that evening?
No.
Why is that?
They had retained counsel. I forget which attorney came on scene. So an agreed upon time at a later date to take their statements was agreed upon.
Are there other things that police officers get in addition to having an attorney that ordinary citizens don't get?
The officers primarily do get buddy officers. It has been in my experience in the past that, although I wouldn't say a citizen would get a buddy citizen, but we have in the past allowed citizens to maybe be with a family member who comes on scene. It's not out of the ordinary, but it doesn't always happen.
Okay. In APD, do you wait until the buddy officer is there before you take any statement from the police officer?
You know, as an investigator, by the time I arrive on scene, that's usually already done.
All right. Was there any processing done of them at the scene before they were allowed to leave the scene?
Yes.
Can you talk to me about that, please?
Each of them will go into the crime van. It's what we call the mobile crime van. For those who don't know what that is, if you ever watch the news on scenes like this, there's usually a big white mobile van. It looks like a big RV. And within there, the criminalistics will process their evidence and process officers. And the officers must go in there with everything that they had on them at the time of the incident, whatever weapons they were carrying, whatever less lethal weapons, whether they were in gloves, helmets, sunglasses, and then they have to get photographed, processed, their firearms are examined, their ammunition is examined. If there's any evidence on their clothing, whether it be bodily fluids, blood, anything like that, that's photographed, and if criminalistics deems it appropriate, they'll take that clothing and tag it into evidence.
Was that done with Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez?
They were processed, yes.
All right. You've got in front of you a book of exhibits. If you could turn to exhibit number 32, please.
Sure. Okay.
And can you identify exhibit 32A, please, for the court?
It is Detective Keith Sandy.
And where was that picture taken?
In the mobile crime van that I had just stated about.
Okay, and that's when he was going through the whole process which you've just discussed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and in fact, you don't just take a frontal picture of the officers, do you?
Yes, you take frontal pictures, side pictures, rear pictures, just kind of like a 360, and then take pictures of their hands front and back.
Okay. And this is a fair and accurate depiction of the photo of Keith Sandy that was taken at the scene in the crime van?
Yes.
Right. And if you can turn to the next picture, and then I'll move them all in at one time. What is the second picture that is 32A?
Appears to be a picture of a 1911 style firearm.
And is this the photograph you take when you're photographing the sidearm of the officer?
Yes.
Is that Keith Sandy's sidearm, how it looked, and that was the picture taken in the crime van at the scene?
It appears to be.
All right, and if you can turn to C, the next thing, what is that?
They appear to be, there's 1, 2, 3 1911, silver 1911 magazines, and it appears that the ammunition has been emptied and lined up with the appropriate magazine that it came out of.
Okay, and can you explain why you do that?
Just to count the rounds.
All right, and again, is that the photograph that was taken of Officer Sandy's ammunition that he had at the scene?
It appears to be.
All right, Your Honor, I would move 32A, B, and C into evidence.
The objection?
No objection. No objection.
It will be admitted, or those exhibits will be admitted?
All right. If you could turn to 37, please.
Okay.
And can you tell the court who 37A is? And I think we've got A and I think we've got two photographs there, or maybe they're both on the same thing. A and B, there you go.
There are, yes,
Okay.
there are two photographs. They are both photographs of Officer Dominic Perez.
And again, are those the photographs that were taken at the scene when Officer Perez was processed?
Yes.
And then if you can go to B, is that the photo of the pistol or the sidearm that Officer Perez had at the scene?
Yes, it appears to be.
And then C, if you can turn to that, is that a photograph of the ammunition that Officer Perez had at the scene?
Yes, it is 223 ammunition.
That's the ammunition that was for the rifle he was carrying?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me something about those bullets that he had in there? What kind of, whether they were soft point, hollow point?
They're not hollow point, they're more like soft point.
All right, and do you know what the purpose is for soft point ammunition?
Yes, it's to actually prevent the ammunition from over-penetration, whereas I know my experience in the military with the green tip full metal jacket is it'll just punch right through and keep going, and that's obviously something that is a concern with police work. You don't want that to happen.
Okay. And does soft point ammunition also do more damage to the human body than does a regular bullet?
It's possible, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I would move 37A, B, and C into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, they will be admitted.
All right. And we're going to go through all of the officers in just a second, but I wanted to talk about something else before we get to that. What did you learn at the briefing about the three different waves of officers who arrived at the scene, and can you explain that to the court?
Yes, I learned that there was an initial call by a citizen named Alexander Thixton. He actually resides at 812 Piedra Vista, in regards to the possible homeless camping behind his house. So the initial response was two open space officers, Officer Patrick Hernandez and John McDaniel. That was kind of the first interaction with Boyd, and that's kind of where things started, escalating. The next response was when their call for assistance over the radio, and that is when Sergeant Jason Carpenter and several other officers arrived and went up to the mountain where James Boyd was, and they started that dialogue, and that went on for some time.
Okay, let me stop you just for a second, because were those officers called field officers?
Yes.
And what is the difference between a field officer and a tactical officer?
So a field officer's main responsibility within the city of Albuquerque is to patrol the streets, respond to calls for service, and by calls for service I mean any citizen that calls 911 or 242 cops and requests the presence of an officer or requests an officer to check something out that they may think is suspicious. They're also, to perform traffic duties, pulling people over, issuing citations if necessary. They're also to drive around and patrol and look for anything suspicious or things of that nature. A SWAT officer primarily is there to respond to critical incidents as they pertain to armed subjects. So they're not necessarily out in the field patrolling all the time.
Okay, and among the field officers that arrived, were there any field officers who had been trained in crisis intervention?
Yes, there wound up being two. In the initial stages of it, there was only one, Officer McCall Monet, and he's the one that had the dialogue with James Boyd the majority of the time. A little bit later, another officer, Brock Niprath, showed up.
All right, and what is the difference between, or the special training that a CIT officer has that's different from regular field officers?
The CIT training, which I've gone through myself, primarily trains you to, or at least assist you in trying to identify people who are in crisis or people who may have mental illness and may be experiencing an episode at that time. And it kind of gives you tools to try, different types of tools to try and diffuse a situation without having to go hands-on with the person, kind of use your words more than anything else.
Okay, and de-escalation, is that a term that you're taught in that too?
Yes.
Okay, and what does de-escalation mean?
De-escalation is showing up to a very tense situation, again, where I say someone may be in crisis, someone may be acting out, whether it be in public or whether it be in a house, and trying to calm the situation so you can bring about, hopefully, a peaceful resolution.
Okay. Did you obtain, in the course of your investigation, the CADs to determine, before we get to the CADs, we forgot the third wave, so I'm going to go back to my original question. So who was the third wave that arrived?
The third wave was the response from detectives from the Special Investigations Division Repeat Offender Project, Keith Sandy and Acting Sergeant Rick Ingram, as well as tactical officers from the SWAT team and the K-9 unit.
All right. Did you obtain the CADs to try to determine when people arrived at the scene?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to the court what a CAD is?
A CAD is a computer-generated call. So going back to what I was talking about with field officers, when a citizen or anybody calls for the assistance of an officer, a radio transmission will be put out to the first available officer, and the officer over the radio will be advised of the contents of the call and what is going on. Now, today with technology in the computer age, all officers have computers in their cars, and basically everything that they're hearing over the radio is sent to them in a format that we refer to as a CAD. and basically it details all the information that they're being told over the radio and even more. Calling party, names of people involved, the content of what's going on, explaining what's going on in the situation. And this is done so while officers are en route, they can be best prepared for the situation that they're going into.
All right. Can you look at Exhibit 21 in your binder there and tell me if those are the CADs that you collected for the shooting of James Boyd?
Do you want me to flip through all of them?
If you just recognize them.
Yes.
Okay. And if you can flip to Exhibit 21, which is, Exhibit 20, which is right in front of that one. And was there a summary done of the CAD calls to pull out just when the officers arrived?
Yes.
And is that Exhibit 21 a fair and accurate summary of the arrival times of the various officers who came to the scene?
Exhibit 20?
Excuse me, you're exactly right.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd move Exhibit 20 and Exhibit 21.
Any objection?
No. The exhibit had previously been admitted as Defendant's Exhibit A, so there is no objection, but just I wanted the court to know.
20 and 21 will be admitted.
All right. And then, now we're going to go back to where all the police officers are and go through identifying all the officers who arrived at the scene. If you could go to, get the very first one. It starts at Exhibit 23, Detective Stone.
Okay.
And can you tell me who is depicted in the picture in 23A?
This is Open Space Officer John McDaniel.
And again, is that the photograph that was taken of him right there at the scene after the shooting?
Yes.
And can you turn to Exhibit B and see if you can identify that as the sidearm that he had?
It appears to be, yes.
And Exhibit C is the photo of the ammunition that he had?
Yes. Your
Your Honor, I'd move 23A, B, and C.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. No objection.
And
Those
if you
will
will
be
turn,
admitted?
thank you, Judge. If you will turn to 24, can you tell me who, which is the very next one? Now they're all going to be in order, I think. 24, can you tell me which officer that is, please?
That is Open Space Officer Patrick Hernandez.
Again, as he was photographed at the scene, and maybe we can short circuit that. All of these are the pictures that were of people who, as they were photographed at the scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you flip to 24B and see if that is the sidearm that he had?
Yes.
And 24C, the ammunition that he had?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move 24A, B, and C into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. No.
They'll be admitted.
Okay, and so we've gone through wave one, the two open spaces officers. If you can turn to 25, and I think we're going to do the field officers now.
Yes.
Who is that depicted in 25?
This is Field Sergeant Jason Carpenter.
And is 25B a photograph of the weapon sidearm that he had at the scene?
Yes, it appears to be.
And is 25C a photo of the ammunition he had at the scene?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move 25A, B, and C into evidence.
Any
No
objection?
objection. No objection.
They'll be admitted.
Okay, if you could turn to 26. Can you tell me who that is?
That is Patrolman Brock Niprath.
And he was one of the CIT officers who arrived?
Correct.
Okay. And can you tell me if 26B is a photograph of the weapons that he had at the scene?
Yes, it appears to be.
And C is the photograph of his ammunition?
Correct.
Your Honor, I'd move 26A, B, and C.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted.
Okay, 27, Detective Stone.
Field Officer Officer McCommon.
Does he go by Mike, too?
He does.
Yeah, okay. And is B a photograph of his sidearm that he had?
It appears to be, yes.
And is C a photograph of the ammunition that he had?
Correct.
Your Honor, I'd move 27A, B, and C.
Any objection?
No objection. No objection.
They will be
And
admitted.
Michael Monet was the other CIT officer, the one who was talking to James Boyd, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And if you can turn to 28, and tell me who that is.
That is Patrolman Christopher Wetterland.
And is B a photograph of the sidearms that he had at the scene?
Yes.
And is C a photograph of the ammunition he had at the scene?
Appears to be, yes.
Your Honor, I'd move 28A, B, and C into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. In fact, if I may, I would stipulate the pictures of police officers that were out there, the guns that they had on their hands, on them, and the ammunition, rather than going through this. Because I think we've said in opening there's 19 of them. And just to speed things along, I don't have any problems with any of the exhibits reflecting pictures of the officers, so I'll stipulate to their admission.
Mr. Robles?
That's fine by defendant Pettis.
All right,
Okay.
Your Honor. Then that would be 29 A, B, and C for the record, 30 A, B, and C, 31 A, B, and C, 33 A, B, and C, 34 A, B, and C, 35 A, B, and C, 36 A, B, and C, 38 A, B, and C, 39 A, B, and C, 40 A, B, and C, and 41 A, B, and C.
All right, then, by stipulation, those exhibits will be admitted.
Judge just made your job easier. Can you talk about how evidence, oh, well, before we go to that, if you can turn to, I'm going to have to find this, 22.
Okay.
And is that a summary of the APD officers and the equipment that they had at the scene?
Yes, it is.
And have you checked that to make sure that is a fair and accurate summary of the ammunition, weapons, and other equipment that the officers had at the scene?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, I would move 22 into evidence.
Any objection?
No. No objection.
22 will be admitted.
The other thing we asked you to do, based on your investigation, was to try to place the officers where they were at the time of the shooting.
Yes.
Detective Stone. And first I want to, let me see what this exhibit number is. State's Exhibit 16, is that just a general picture of the area? In case you can't really see that very well, can you?
I can see it. Yes, it's the general area of that particular mound that you're seeing right there is referred to as U Mound in that neighborhood.
All right. I move 16 into evidence, Judge.
Any objection to 16?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
It will be admitted.
And then is this, State's Exhibit 17, a close-up of that same area.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and did you go through and try to place people, and again, with the recognition this is not the way they were standing or where they were facing at the time, but just to place everybody on this diagram where they were at the time of the shooting?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move State's Exhibit 17.
I believe an adequate foundation has not been laid by this witness with regards to the locations of the officers who were indicated on that particular exhibit.
Okay, could we lay a little more foundation on that one, please?
Yes. Detective Stone, does this fairly and accurately depict where the officers were located at the time that James Boyd was shot?
It does, and it was based off the interviews that were taken of all the officers, and all the officers produced hand-drawn sketches of the area and indicated where they were standing at the time of the incident.
All right, Your Honor, I would now move State's Exhibit 17 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Robles?
No objection.
No objection.
17 will be admitted.
All right, you were sort of in charge of organizing, collecting all the evidence and making sure it all made it to the evidence room from this shooting. Is that right, Detective Stone?
Yes.
Can you tell me, first of all, where you got the bullet, the one bullet that was recovered from Mr. Boyd's left shoulder?
That was recovered during James Boyd's autopsy at the Office of the Medical Examiner.
All right, how does that work that APD goes and gets that?
The lead criminalistics detective, who was Nate Render in this case, is responsible for obtaining all physical evidence from the Office of the Medical Investigator to include that projectile you're talking about.
Okay, and how do we ensure that that projectile is the same projectile that later gets tested to compare with other bullets? Like what processes are in place to make sure that that happens?
It's a process that we refer to as a chain of custody of evidence. And to better explain chain of custody, For those who don't know, it's basically written documentation of evidence passing from one hand to another hand or going from one place to another place, and it's documented on an agency-appropriate document.
All right. And did we ask you to bring today the bullet that actually came to APD from OMI?
Yes.
Okay, and Ken, I think it's in that bag right next to you up there. If you
want me
can
to
pull
grab
that
it?
out. Yes, sir. Okay, and what I'd like to do is mark that as Exhibit 53, if we can. Okay, and there's writing all over this, this envelope. Can you talk to the court about how you make, what that writing is about and how it maintains the chain of custody to make sure this is the same bullet that came out of Mr. Boyd?
So whenever an item of evidence is tagged into evidence, it obviously just can't be tagged in by itself. It has to be within a receptacle, an envelope or something like that. So what you're seeing here as far as what we refer to as seals is they're different seals. So when the envelope is initially sealed after the evidence is placed in it, whoever sealed and tagged the evidence must, as far as APD policy, must put their initials, the case number, and the date that that seal was applied to that envelope. The additional seals that you will see is anytime the item of evidence is going to be examined by someone, they obviously have to make a cut or a slit to get the evidence open. Once the examination is complete, the evidence is placed back in. A new seal is put on there with the initials and the typically the date of the person who did the examination.
Okay, so tell me how the trip the bullet made from OMI to evidence and then was put in this envelope. Is that how it worked?
That is how it works. I wasn't there. Wasn't the one that did it. From the initials that I'm looking on here, NR, I believe Nate Render is the one that did that.
That's your criminalistics person?
Correct.
Okay, and I understand APD criminalistics actually at some point took this bullet out to try to compare it with some test fires that it did.
Objection leading.
I'll
Judge,
allow the question.
It's just foundational to bring us to that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when they do that, how do they indicate that they've taken the bullet out and then put the same bullet back in?
They should indicate it, one, on their report.
Yep.
And again, I'm seeing another one of our seals down here, which indicates to me that that was done. And by the date that I'm seeing on the seal, it correlates with the date when of the examination.
All right. And APD criminalistics claim they could not make a match of the bullet in this particular case. Is that right?
Correct.
So what did
Sustained.
you? Okay. What did
What's
you?
the leading question?
What did you do? Well, was APD criminalistics able to make a match of this bullet?
No.
So what was done, and what trip did this bullet take to try to determine and make a match of this bullet?
At the request of the special prosecutor, after discussion of how evidence was to get to an independent examiner who is out in Santa Ana, California, I felt for chain of custody purposes, it was appropriate me to actually fly the physical evidence myself to the area of where it was going to be examined. So I did that by signing the evidence out from my crime lab, and that is annotated on a chain of custody from the actual crime lab. I flew the evidence. I had prior coordination with the airlines and with TSA. Although there was no live ammunition, I still wanted them to be aware of it. So I didn't want any issues of them taking stuff from me, breaking chain of custody. So I flew the evidence with me on board the aircraft to Santa Ana, where I met up with the independent firearms examiner, Rocky Edwards. And he works for the Santa Ana Police Department. And I actually signed the evidence over to him via a chain of custody from my department and also a chain of custody from his department.
Okay. And in addition to this bullet, what else did you take with you on that trip to Rocky Edwards with Santa Ana?
I also took a fragment from a bullet, a very small piece that was also collected during autopsy, I believe, or at some point. I also brought test fires from both Dominic Perez's rifle and Keith Sandy's rifle. These test fires were done after the incident, and I also believe that is all that I took.
Okay. What is the purpose of a test fire after a shooting like this?
They do test fires of the rifles, so hopefully a firearms examiner can match a projectile to a certain rifle. I mean, I'm not a firearms examiner myself.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you about that. We'll bring Rocky in to talk about that. But what were the test fires? Were the rifles that were used to shoot at Mr. Boyd taken before Officer Perez and Officer Sandy left the scene?
Yes.
And why was the purpose of taking them then as opposed to letting them go home with them and then come back for the test fires?
Well, because then you would have a break in the chain of custody of that evidence. Those firearms, once they were used in this incident, did become crucial evidence in the case. So it's not customary to let evidence like that just leave. I mean, it would be like, say, in a murder investigation, telling a family member, hey, take this gun, bring it to me back in the morning. Someone may do something to it or alter it. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying that there's always that possibility. So that's why we always want to maintain that evidence in our custody at all times until we're done with the examination.
Okay. Do you know if they were allowed to go home and they shot a bunch of bullets through it, whether it would change the rifling or change the ability to match the bullet?
I wouldn't know if, I don't know.
Okay. Were the rifles returned after the test fires were done to the officers?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Did you handle the test fires in this and taking them out of evidence and giving them to Mr. Edwards in the same exact way that you handled this bullet, which was we've marked as State's Exhibit 53?
Are you talking about
Chain of custody.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
The little did you bring with you both the test fires and the little projectile
Yes.
fragment? Yes. Can you pull those out, please, too?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So if you can mark the fragment as 53A, please. And can you explain all this biohazard stuff on this one and on 53 as well?
Evidence will be marked biohazard if there's a possibility of presence of contamination, typically as it relates to bodily fluids, blood, something like that.
Okay, and for a bullet, that's the contamination you're concerned about, is the blood on the
Yes.
bullet? Okay. And then 54, I would like to make Officer Pettis's.
Pettis as well
That's
as
one, I think.
firearm 1.
All right. Let me mark that as 54. And then can we mark the test fires from Officer Sandy's gun as 55? Okay, Your Honor, I would move 53, 53A, 54, and 55.
Your Honor, Jack Black of Foundation, can I just take a look at what you just handed as well?
Sure.
Just so that I can help articulate that. heard or actually seen the introduction of the chain of custody for those specific exhibits, number one. Also, from what I've heard from this officer's testimony, I don't believe that there's been he's just suggesting, he looks at the initials and suggests that, for example, there was an officer, I think it's rendered, another officer that actually took that. We haven't heard his testimony.
This is fine, Judge. We'll bring Nate Render in if Mr. Brigman says Mr. Render is coming. We can have him talk about that too. But I think as far as the bullet, what is the objection as far as the bullet that came from Mr. Boyd?
Well, let me just, officer, which are those bullets that the fragments of that you personally had contact with as far as the testifier?
As far as the testifier at our crime lab, Your Honor?
You didn't do that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I'll sustain the objection at this time.
All right, Judge. Can you take me through then what happened after Rocky Edwards examined these items that you brought, 53, 53A, 54, and 55?
He indicated to me that he believed he could possibly identify which rifle the projectile came from. That's what was told to me. So he requested that I take the evidence.
Someone will object based on hearsay.
Sustained as to hearsay.
Okay.
I went to.
Hang on. Ask another question.
I will, Judge. So after he did his examination, whatever conclusion he came to, and Mr. Edwards will be here to talk about that, where did the bullets go, this group of things, 53, 53A, 54, and 55, where did they go next, and who did they go with?
I took them to a place in Montreal, Canada, called, I believe it's called Ultra Forensic Technologies, and I was asked to bring the items right here, the projectile, the fragment, and the testifiers there so they can be examined.
Okay, and what was the purpose of the examination or the scans in Montreal?
Objection, lack of foundation. I don't think he's
Any
testifying.
response?
Well, let me rephrase the question, Judge.
Okay.
What was done to them in Montreal? What was done to these items of evidence in Montreal?
I witnessed an examination done to them under a microscope.
All right. Do you know if photographs or scans were taken of these particular items?
Yes.
And do you know if that was the purpose for flying the bullets to Montreal?
Yes.
Now, why did you not just FedEx all these bullets around to all these places? Why did you actually personally accompany the bullets both to Santa Ana and to Montreal?
Again, my concerns with chain of custody in this case. I didn't want to have there be any kind of issue with the evidence getting lost. I'm not knocking the mail system. I'm just saying I didn't want it lost, damaged, or anything like that. It's an important case, so I wanted to maintain chain of custody at all times.
Okay. When you were out in Montreal, tell me how each scan of each particular item of this evidence occurred.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Judge, I'm just going to talk about what he observed as far as opening the package.
That was my understanding.
That's right.
Let's keep it to what the witness observed.
Right, and we're bringing the woman from Montreal too, Judge, so go ahead.
I observed myself. I would go with one piece of evidence at a time. I myself took out 2 projectiles from the firearm 1 bag, one at a time, and I watched as the examiner performed her scan. Once I did that, and it was projectiles labeled 3 and 4 on the back of the projectile itself. Next, what I did is I took out...
And wait a second, before you started the next one, what did you do with the 2 that she had scanned?
I put them back in the bag and sealed it up.
All right. And why did you do that? Why were you careful to do that rather than open it all up and give it all to her at one time?
I didn't want to get anything mixed up.
All right. Okay. Next step.
The next one, from firearm 2, I took out 2 projectiles and passed them one at a time because there was only one examination of one projectile going on at a time. But 2 wound up coming out of this bag and what it appeared to me get scanned. And after one was done, I would put it back in the bag. As the second one was done, I'd put it back in the bag and then seal the bag.
And you sealed it before you opened anything else up?
Yes.
Okay, and
Objection leading.
what did you do with the bullet itself that is 53? How did you handle that as far as scanning was concerned?
Same thing. I took it out of its bag, gave it to the examiner, and the examiner put it under the microscope and performed the scan.
And you stayed there while all this happened?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Were you
Let's
present?
not lead the witness.
Were you present the entire time this happened?
I was.
And then once the scan was performed, what did you do?
Once the scan was performed, I put it back in the bag, and that was it.
Okay. At any time, was there ever items from different bags out at the same time?
No.
All right. And why is that?
Again, I didn't want there to be any confusion. I didn't want to have any evidence going into the wrong bag.
Okay. Can I have just a second, Judge?
Yes.
Detective, as you handed each item to the woman who was doing the scans, did you tell her what it was or what bag it was coming out of?
Yes, I explained to her what bag it was coming from. Yes.
And what item of evidence it was?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Okay.
I'll allow that question.
All right. After the scans got done in Montreal, where did those travel to?
I flew them from Montreal all the way back to Santa Ana, California.
Why is that?
Because the examination needed to be complete by Rocky Edwards.
All right. And what was the process, again, once you brought them back to Santa Ana that you did as far as maintaining chain of custody with Mr. Edwards?
Same process. I signed all the evidence over to him. It was on a chain of custody form, documented on an APD chain of custody form, as well as a Santa Ana chain of custody form, and then I left the evidence there for a couple weeks.
All right. And then how did you get the evidence back?
Same thing. I flew back to Santa Ana, California, excuse me. Chain of custody forms were signed. The evidence was signed back over to me, and I flew it back to Albuquerque, where I checked them back into evidence, our evidence holder,
And have they been there until you brought them to court today?
as far as I know.
All right. In addition to this evidence, were photographs taken at the scene of the place where Mr. Boyd was living?
Up on the hill?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you turn to Exhibit 15, please, in the exhibit book? Oh, I'm sorry, page 16. I think we've already got that one in. So hold on. 16, 17 we've gotten in. Let's go to 18. And can you take a look at those photographs, 18A and B, which I think have already been admitted, and then C, D, and E, and can you tell me what those are?
These photographs are the area in which James Boyd was camping up in the foothills.
And do those fairly and accurately depict the area as you saw it during your investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move 18 C, D, and E into evidence.
18 C, D, and E?
Yes. And I believe, Judge, if you can check your thing, I think that A and B have already been admitted.
I believe so.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would add that they were admitted for the limited purpose of showing the campsite after the incident that was in question, not what the campsite looked like before.
And I'm assuming that's what they're being offered for.
Correct, Judge.
Okay. All right, they will be admitted. That's 18 C, D, and E.
Did you collect any evidence from that particular location?
I personally did not, but evidence was collected by criminalistics.
All right. And Was it saved at the APD evidence room, the evidence that was taken from Mr. Boyd's tent home?
Yes.
Has it been in evidence ever since?
As far as I know, yes.
All right. And I'd like to, you've brought that today too?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you about some of the items that were recovered from that tent home. Did you recover any money from Mr. Boyd or his home that was there on the premises?
Money was recovered, yes.
And have you brought all the money Mr. Boyd had at his tent home here to the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you find that in the evidence and pull that out for me, please?
Sure. Okay.
And let me mark those two, Judge. I'd like to mark them since there are two bags of them, 19D1 and 19D2.
D is in dog?
D is in dog, Your Honor, yes. And can you tell me, first of all, where the items in 19D1 came from?
I'm just objecting, I'm speculating if it's not based on personal knowledge, I want that to be clear. In other words, let's ask where it came from. If he didn't collect it, that's speculation.
Well, I understand, but they haven't been moved into evidence yet, and I
Right.
was waiting for another question. But
Do you know where that came from? If I could start.
Yes, I was advised that it came from his camp.
All right. And how much money was in D1? D1 is the first one. Oh, to your left. To your
I
right.
believe it's like 9 cents.
Okay. And then if you can take a look at the second exhibit, D2, and tell me how much money was recovered from Mr. Boyd's camp on D2. $9.31. Okay. Your Honor, I would move D1, 19D1, and 19D2.
No, I reject, he didn't collect it, he's basing it on hearsay, Your Honor. So she says how much was collected at Mr. Boyd's camp, he was not the one that collected that, Your Honor. So it's based purely on hearsay.
Let's
Declaring the objection.
sustain the objections at this time.
All right, Your Honor, we will bring this up with Mr. Brender. Did you... Okay, Judge?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there a fanny pack with an empty mace canister collected at the scene?
Yes,
Did you bring that today, too?
I did.
Okay, can you pull that out, please? Let me mark what's, the fanny pack is 19C1. And the empty mace canister as 19C2. Can you tell me, Detective, if this is the black fanny pack that Mr. Boyd is wearing in the video?
I don't know for sure, but it appears to be.
Okay. And how did APD determine that this mace canister was empty?
That I don't know.
Okay. I would move 19C1 and 19C2 into evidence.
Same objection, Your Honor, he did not collect it, and he says, I'm not sure as to whether or not it was the same backpack in the video, so there's no ability for him to testify as to its reliability.
Mr. Roble?
Declaring the objection.
Let's sustain the objection.
Okay. Were there 3 books recovered from the campsite?
I believe so.
Okay, what kind of books were they that were recovered from the campsite?
Bibles.
And were any of those Bibles inside the fanny pack that Mr. Boyd was wearing at the time?
Objection, lack of foundation calls for speculation.
I'll allow him to answer the question if he knows, but I'd ask you to avoid any hearsay
Sure, Judge.
information.
Do you know where the Bibles were found?
No.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Render about that too. Okay, did you bring those today too?
Yes.
Okay, can you open up the bag and pull those out for me, please? And is one of the Bibles, are you taking it out of the same bag where the fanny pack was?
Objection, lack of foundation calls for speculation.
I'm just asking if
Packet
it's
here,
taking out
I'll
of
allow a
that.
question to be asked.
It appears to be yes.
All righty.
I'm not seeing a Bible in this one.
Okay, can you look in the other bag and see if there's one in the other bag? If you can have that, so they look real, I'll look it up. So one of these.
There's one.
Okay, let's mark that one as 1981. Are you see more in here? or should
I don't know if there is or not.
Okay. And you want to look in the second, you want to look at this one? or you want to
I can look at this
Okay,
one.
all right. And then people say for part-time, what we can maybe do is do this on the break.
I didn't hear that.
Would that be okay?
I didn't hear
If we
it.
could, maybe we'll save time for the court, maybe we can have Detective Stone do this on the break and pull them out on the break rather than.
Well, I was planning on breaking at 10 o'clock.
All right, Judge, why don't we put this down, we'll pull these out, having looked through this item, it's the
Okay,
first time, and we'll
that's
go through
fine.
the other things, okay. All right. Detective, did he also have 3 pocket knives?
Yes, I believe there were.
And have you brought those with you as well?
Yes.
Can you pull those out, please? Are those the pocket knives that were photographed at the scene?
They appear to be.
And were there two that Mr. Boyd was had in his hands occasionally in the videos, and then one that was on the ground?
Yes, I wasn't there when they were collected, but that's correct.
Okay, can you identify which one was which from your knowledge of the case?
I'd have to refer to the report, but I think Nathan Render would know for sure.
Okay, there are two black ones and then one with a wooden handle?
Correct.
All right. Let me mark the first black one 19B1, the second black one 19B2, and the third black one 19B3. That's the one with the wooden handle.
Correct.
And I would move 19B1, B2, and B3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
19B1, B2, and B3 will be admitted without objection.
Even though the state will note that Detective Render hasn't testified about those either. But let me get some water here. Let's talk about the statements that were taken of the officers.
Okay.
Were officers Perez and Sandy interviewed right away the night of the shooting?
No.
What is APD practice in a shooting involving a civilian about whether you try to interview people at the as soon as you can after the event?
It depends on what kind of crime you're investigating, whether it's a homicide, a justified homicide by a citizen, or if we're talking about a murder. As it relates to murder, specifically if someone's committed a crime, I do typically try to interview them right away, try to get there before they have time to think about their situation. It's not done in the immediacy. Obviously, I still need to gather as much information as I can prior to talking to them. And also, as it relates to someone who's in custody, I'm bound by the law that I can only hold them in custody for so long before I have to book them. So typically, yes, I do try to interview them that night or within some hours.
Okay, knowing that everybody has a constitutional right to ask for a lawyer,
Correct.
Is it your preference to talk to them before they get a lawyer, if you can?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, specifically to my experience, when someone asks for an attorney, it usually comes along, they just simply don't want to talk to me anymore.
Okay, after the attorney comes on the scene.
Correct.
Right. When you are dealing with a scene involving a homicide where a citizen is accused, what is your practice about separating all of the witnesses and the participants from each other?
The practice is you do want to separate anyone who's witnessed the crime or anyone who's involved in the crime. You don't want people getting their stories straight. We do, to the best of my knowledge, try to do that as well on police shootings as well.
Okay. Do you show them the physical evidence before you take a statement, or do you usually wait till after the statement is taken?
Typically, I don't like to show, obviously, the physical evidence that I have. However, in my experience, there have been some people that just simply won't talk unless I show them what I got. So, I mean, it could go both ways.
Okay.
I'm going to object to this line of question because I don't think it's relevant what other investigations are done. What's relevant is the evidence about this specific case and these officers and what they did, and the evidence gathered about that. How an investigation is run in any other type of case is not the same as this investigation. So I would object. I don't think it's relevant.
I think we can stipulate that this investigation was handled differently than all other investigations, Judge. But that's the whole point of getting into this.
I think there is some relevance to it as to how it was handled in the field, so I'll allow the state to ask the question. Go ahead.
All right. If the same lawyer is representing two suspects, same lawyer, two suspects, that give you some concern about them in a situation involving just a regular citizen?
Objection to the extent that it calls for a legal conclusion and relevance.
And your question was, does it give him concern?
Him concern about getting the true story if there's one lawyer representing two different suspects.
Mr. Robles?
Then there's 403, Your Honor. The prejudice of somehow implying that the reliance on these defendants on an attorney somehow is improper.
Oh, and I'm not implying that at all, Judge. I've said people have a right to a lawyer. The question is, does he have concerns if two different suspects in a case have the same lawyer?
So the question essentially guts the statement that there is no, that essentially it's fine for a witness to talk to a lawyer, because the question asks for concerns, challenging the constitutional right my client has to an attorney.
That's not the intent at all, Judge.
I'll allow the question to be asked so long as it relates to his police practices.
Sure,
So-
Judge. And let me back up and I'll lay a better foundation for it.
All right.
One of the reasons you separate witnesses is so that they can't coordinate their stories. Is that right?
Objection leading.
I'm trying to get back to sort of the
I'll
area,
allow
Judge.
the question. Go ahead.
Preliminary.
Correct.
All right. Are there any concerns when there is one person who is representing two different people as far as the coordination of stories might be concerned?
You know, I don't think I've ever had a case in the past where that has come up. I guess it's not something I've ever thought about. I've never really been concerned when, say, a suspect in any of my cases talks to an attorney, so no.
Okay. Let's talk about Keith Sandy's statement. Well, first of all, let's talk about when the interviews did happen, if they didn't happen right away. What date did you interview both Officer Sandy and Officer Pettis?
I'd have to refer to the time. I don't remember the exact date.
Okay. Would something refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Were these statements transcribed?
Yes, they were.
All right, let me hand you what's been marked as 14B and 14A. Do you recognize those as the transcribed statements of Keith Sandy?
Yes.
And were Officer Sandy's statement and Officer Pettis' statement taken on the same, the first statement now, taken on the same day?
Yes.
And does that refresh your recollection about the date that the first statement was taken?
Yes.
And what date was that?
March 18th.
All right. That was 2 days after the shooting?
Correct.
Where were the statements conducted?
At the Family Advocacy Center.
That's not a police station, is it?
No, but it houses the Violent Crimes Unit.
Okay. Do you know whether or not Detective Sandy had viewed the videotape of the shooting before he came to see you?
No, I don't know.
Or whether he'd learned about any of the other evidence in the case before he came to see you?
No.
Did you allow Keith Sandy to come back and give a second statement?
Yes.
Can you talk about how that happened?
That was based upon new evidence that had come up later on during the investigation.
And what was going on that caused him to come in and want to give a second statement?
As it relates to the evidence in question, the Coban video audio from Sergeant Chris Ware's car, some statements were made particular to Keith Sandy's Taser shotgun. However,
There was a rumor that got out.
there was a rumor that got out, and unfortunately, the evidence was not given to me in a timely manner, even though I had requested it numerous times.
And by the evidence, you mean the Coban tape itself?
Correct.
All right.
So by the time I actually got the evidence and was able to examine the evidence myself, this rumor had gotten so out of control that I felt I needed to bring Detective Sandy in to address it.
Okay. And the rumor was that Detective Sandy had said something else about
Right.
shooting somebody in the private parts, essentially, is what was the rumor. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's not what's on the tape, is it?
I've never heard anything like that, no.
Okay. And so whose idea was it to have Detective Sandy come back in and give a second statement?
It was mine.
And what date was the second statement?
April 7th of that year.
All right. And do you have a fair and accurate transcript of that particular statement in front of you as well?
Yes, I do.
That's 14B, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. At the time that Detective Sandy came in and gave that statement, had you heard the Coban tape yet?
Yes, I
Right.
had.
Had he heard the Coban tape yet?
No.
All right. What did Detective Sandy say to you about, in his second statement on this date, about what he had said to Detective Ware? And if it will refresh your recollection, I think it's on page 4 of that.